When we talk about the relationship between science and religion, it may come as a surprise to some people, but probably not to most, that there isn't really a consensus about the nature of the relationship between the two. And there's actually a lot of different opinions and a lot of different ideas about how science and religion, and in particular the Christian faith, interact with each other. Do they interact with each other, in fact, is a question that is often addressed. So if I was to ask you right now, can you define for me the relationship between science and religion? Depending on who I'm asking, I could get very different answers. And so today, that's what I want to talk about. Let's talk about the different views on the nature of the relationship between science and religion. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Science and Faith podcast. Today, we're talking about the relationship between science and religion. In particular, we're going to be looking at different views regarding the relationship between science and the Christian faith. So today, let's get started. If you have a question or a comment, remember you can email us. Our email address is scienceandfaithdortmund@gmail.com. And be sure to check out our website, scienceandfaith.de. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first view, really there's four main views that we can classify the relationship between science and religion in. Ian Barbour was a professor of theology who really kind of popularized this four views model of the science and faith relationship. And so it's not a perfect model. Barbour has not been without his critics. And so I want to make that clear up front that this isn't the standard or the only four ways of viewing the relationship between science and faith. But it certainly is the most popular view. And I think if you're coming at the science and religion discussion and you don't have a solid grasp on the different views of the relationship between science and faith, then this is a good place to start. This is a good launch pad, a good springboard to begin, and then you can go on to develop your own views or look at other positions. But if you have a minimal knowledge or no knowledge of the science and faith relationship views, this is a good place to start. So we're going to use Barbour as kind of a way to talk about the science-faith relationship. So the first view that we're going to talk about is the view of conflict. This is the idea that science and religion, their relationship is defined by conflict. And so there's two kind of main camps of people that would fall into this. The first would be obviously atheists, in particular the new atheists, who see science and religion as inherently in conflict. The two cannot be reconciled. Scientific knowledge can falsify religious claims. Science knowledge is the most reliable, most dependable knowledge we have about the world. And so that's the only form of knowledge that is legitimate. On the other end, we have young earth creationism. And young earth creationism would see evolutionary science and the Bible as inherently in conflict. These are views that cannot be reconciled. When the Bible says that the world was created, or the universe was created in 6 literal 24-hour days, and evolutionary science says that the world was created over millions and billions of years, that those two are inherent. Those two claims are inherently in conflict, and so the Bible must be sided with over science. And so the atheists and young earth creationists would see science and religion as inherently in conflict. The second view is known as independence, and that is exactly what it sounds like. It's the view that science and religion are independent from one another. They have nothing to do with one another. They have nothing to contribute to each other. They are two completely separate fields that have nothing to do with each other. And the people who probably are most well-known associated with this view in the theological camp would be the neo-Orthodox. They're probably the most the biggest popularizers of the independence view of science and religion. And in the science camp, the late Stephen Jay Gould, the evolutionary biologist at Harvard University, popularized the slogan NOMA, which is NOMA, which stands for non-overlapping magisteria. And he argued as well, along with the neo-Orthodox, that science and religion are two separate fields that have nothing really to do with each other. And they're to be kept separate in religious knowledge. is to be kept separate from scientific knowledge, and the two never interact with each other. The third view is that of dialogue. Now, Barbour actually caught a little bit of heat over this term because of its vagueness. A lot of people have criticized Barbour, saying that we needed a more precise term. But dialogue is kind of what it sounds like. It's that science and faith are actually in a conversation with each other. That scientific knowledge and the knowledge that we gain from scientific research and scientific endeavors can be helpful and can contribute to religious knowledge and religious claims. And likewise, religious knowledge, theology, and theological truths have something to say to the scientific world, and that the two can benefit from each other and can work in partnership with each other. You could also say the view, instead of dialogue, maybe partnership would be a better word to describe that view and that relationship. So that would be the third view, is what is known as dialogue. The people most associated with this, the late Pope John Paul II in the theological world. In the scientific world, we have Francis Collins, who was the head of the Human Genome Project and who is the director of the National Institutes for Health. And he would hold to this position as well. He's a very well-known, very well-respected scientist. So the fourth position then is the position of integration. And this position is exactly as it sounds. It's the belief that science and faith are distinguishable, but they are so integrated that they cannot be separated. So science, scientific knowledge, religious knowledge, we can't separate the two. We can't separate the physical from the spiritual. It's all integrated together. When a scientist goes into the lab, he has his religious biases that are with him. And so the scientific knowledge and the religious knowledge that we gain are integrated. And it can be distinguished, but it cannot be separated. And the figures that are most associated with the integration position would be those of the intelligent design movement. And so molecular biologist Michael Behe would be a proponent of this, saying that the scientific evidence that we have and that we gain needs to be interpreted through a religious lens, and then the scientific evidence itself points to religious truth, and vice versa. The religious realm is capable of making scientific claims, and so these two views are integrated into one another, and although they can be distinguished, they cannot be separated. And so those are the four views of the science and faith discussion. You have conflict, independence, dialogue, and integration. And those four views are kind of just an overview. They're a good starting point for beginning to understand the nature of the relationship between science and religion. So that's our show for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, if you have a question or a comment, feel free to leave it below or send us an email, scienceandfaithdortmund@gmail.com. That's scienceandfaithdortmund@gmail.com. Or visit our website, scienceandfaith.de. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.